Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Net Impact Issues in Depth call. I'm Meredith Bell, Content Development Manager here at Net Impact. We're very pleased to be joined today by three guests: Faizun Kamal, Founder and Chief Sourcer of sourceFK, Oliver Madison, Founder and CEO of Me to We Style, and Shannon Whitehead, Founder of Factory 45. Shannon will also be serving as our discussion host of today's hangout. Before we dive into the conversation, I wanted to remind everyone in the audience that our speakers are eager to answer your questions and to respond to your comments during the hangout. You can submit your questions throughout the call by chatting them in via the Q&A app on the right-hand side of your screen. You can also upvote other attendees' questions by clicking on the +1. So Shannon, I'd like to turn it over to you now to kick off our conversation.
Okay, thank you so much, Meredith. Hi, everyone. Welcome. I guess we'll just start really quickly. This will be a casual sort of conversation amongst the three of us, and then, like Meredith said, we'll take questions. But I want to start with some introductions first, and ladies first. Let's have Faizun introduce yourself and just sort of give us a background of your business as well.
Sure. Thank you, Shannon. On this webinar with all of you. My name is Faizun Kamal. I am the founder and chief sourcer of sourceFK.
Okay, I think we might have lost you. Let's bounce on over to Oliver, since it seems to be frozen.
No problem. So I'll do a quick intro. As obviously name's already been done, and I haven't been able to get that little sign at the bottom of my screen. But I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Me to We Style. So what we actually do is it's apparel. We supply a lot of schools, universities, companies with custom clothing, and we also have a retail line. And there's really three pillars that make our product a little bit different. It's the social, the environmental, and the charity component. So in the social, all of our stuff is sourced either fair trade, or we don't do as much of that because we manufacture, but we're the only manufacturer in North America to have been socially audited successfully by the Fair Trade Labeling Organization, the parent of Transfer USA, Transfer Canada, etc. And we disclose all of our manufacturers to third parties who monitor the quality of labor and so on. But everything is domestically made in the US and Canada, so that's worth noting. On the environmental side, it's all eco-friendly. So we use organic cotton, so every organic cotton t-shirt saves 1/3 of a pound of pesticides, or we use other eco-friendly materials out there like recycled polyesters and so on to achieve, in some cases, custom products for our people. And then the third pillar, charity, which is perhaps most different, 50% of our net profits go to our charity partner, Free the Children. They build schools around the world, and some of you may have seen them as they were the exclusive charity partner of Oprah's Angel Network some years ago, and since then have pioneered a series of events called We Days, where about 15,000 kids per city get together and watch and get inspired by different people who are speaking or musical acts and so on to celebrate a year of change and social impact after. So that's in a very broad strokes what we do. And otherwise, I think Faizun is back online, so I'll turn it over to her and let her go back to the intro.
Hey, thanks, Oliver. Sorry, you guys. Obviously, this is the day to have all sorts of computer problems, right? So as I was saying, sourceFK, we are an innovative business with a social mission, and we primarily work with women artisans in Bangladesh. These ladies are handloom weavers mostly, and they make silks and cottons, and we create markets for their goods here in the US. In the process, we pay them fair wages, and sales proceeds also fund education and training programs that we have for the ladies in place. So in a nutshell, that's kind of what we do.
Great, thank you. And so for me, I run an accelerator program for designers and makers. And so what happened was I started out in the ethical fashion world, launching my own brand back in 2010. And my co-founder and I knew nothing about fashion, let alone ethical fashion, and so we sort of haphazardly navigated our way towards setting up a supply chain within the U.S., finding a local domestic manufacturer, And sort of through that process realized, wow, this is really hard. It's really hard to do things right, and it's really hard to break into this industry. So in the past 4 years, I sort of have come into this world, this very small, sustainable apparel world, and now I help other designers and makers navigate those challenges and set them up with the supply chain resources within the U.S. So I want to just start, I think some of the most interesting things about what we all have going on is sort of how we got started, and I know that's a lot of what everyone else wants to know about. So Oliver, I guess let's start with you again. How did you get started in this industry?
Well, like many of you, I did not come from the clothing industry. I actually came from the investment banking industry, and so it was quite a shift. But it really started over what I call a commiseration lunch. So one of my other co-founders ran the charity Free the Children, and they were experiencing a very common business problem: revenue visibility. They weren't able to raise money. They were competing against other events like the tsunami 10 years ago in Southeast Asia to raise money, and sometimes they'd find great people, but they wouldn't be able to retain them because they didn't have the consistency of revenue that they required. So we said, wouldn't it be great to solve that problem? And over a bottle of wine, over a long lunch, we said, it'd be great to solve that problem. It'd also be great to build a business. What would that be? What would that look like? So ultimately we said, what are people asking for? And at the time, especially in sort of central Canada, in Toronto and New York and a few other places, we had a lot of people asking us, where can we get ethically produced apparel? And we didn't have a good answer, but we saw an opportunity if we could solve the problem. So ultimately, after that lunch, we said, let's look into it, and that's how the idea was born for a company that sources ethically, that manufactures ethical apparel, and provides a revenue stream for the charity, and that's how the 50-50 partnership between us and our charity partner was born. So that was sort of the early stage, and obviously there was a lot of list making, a lot of stressful mornings, waking up at 5 in the morning thinking, what have I done with my life? How will this ever work? Will anyone actually buy this once I figure out how to make it? So, but fortunately, we've been very fortunate to get past some of those hurdles, and of course there's more to go.
Faizun, did you find you had the same sort of inner dialogue going when you were starting out?
No, everything was perfect from day one. No, I'm kidding. I wish it was. I wish it was. Like Oliver, I too did not come from the fashion or design world myself. I actually come from the international development world. It was while I was working at the World Bank in Bangladesh. My background, my interests are in development, particularly focusing on women's issues, and I've always had an interest, a natural passion for fashion and textiles and design. And working at the bank, it's a great institution. It's a huge institution. It makes a lot of impact around the world, but it's also a huge bureaucracy, right? And so there are many things that could be done differently. There are a lot of funds that are used that may be used in a different manner. And these sorts of questions that I had, along with some of the colleagues that I was working with at the time, started me thinking about, well, is there a way to put together some sort of an initiative that brings together all of these different interests I have, but with as little bureaucracy as possible so that we actually get the work done?
Did I lose you again? Okay. Oliver, you lost her too, right?
Yes, I lost her as well.
Okay. Okay, well, I'll jump in. I also do not come from the fashion industry. I was a journalism major, so I guess you have three people who, I think it's good to know that, you can come from a totally different sector and break into this industry in some way, but same thing, sort of saw this need. People wanted to have a way to buy ethically made, ethically sourced clothing, and sort of filling that void for that, and wanting the freedom of entrepreneurship at the same time. Faizun, I'll let you go back and finish your thought.
I'm so sorry. I'm being the disruptive one here. I don't even know where I cut off. I think essentially yes. I was just saying. I think there isn't any one who are trying to think of, what next steps look like for a career path, there is not one path that leads you to it. I think, yes, you have those long lunches over wine. You have long sleepless nights. You kind of try and say, is this for me? My parents spent a lot of money sending me to college. I now have a lot of debt that I'm saddled with. Do I want to go into a field where I know I'm not going to be making a lot of money from the get-go? So I think these are some of the challenges that we all face and we all work through, and hopefully we get to a point where it's really all worth it.
For sure. And I think that's, one of the main questions is the money question comes up. How do you create a financially viable, financially sustainable business, be able to support yourself and also do good? And Oliver, you've been in business for quite some time. Can you walk us through, were you making money from day one, or, how long did it take you to break even?
If only we could, if only we could say that. So, when we started, I think like a lot of startups, we started with a concept that usually takes about, in any standard business, around 3 years to hit break even, and we figured if by year 3 we were at break even, it was viable. So a lot of people say sometimes you start a business and how do I know if I'm going to continue? A lot of people think of it as forever. We looked at it as a project, and we said, look, by year 3 we could target to being profitable. Year 1 and 2, after year 1 for me personally, I knew that it had to look viable. By year 2, it had to have a clear path, and by year 3, it had to be profitable. We were fortunate. I think we spent a lot of time on phone calls, and we sort of shook every tree we could. And I think we had some instant advantages through our partnership with the charity, through their corporate partners, and so on. But we were lucky that within the first 12 months, it took us about 14 months, 15 months to set up the business, to understand how to manufacture, to understand. It wasn't how to manufacture. Everyone offered to do that quite simply, but it was how to scale. So because we were in a business where we do a lot of custom stuff, so we have customers who can order 35, 45, 55,000 pieces at a time, we needed to know that if we were successful in bringing those customers on, there would be only one chance to execute and actually win that order. So we had to figure out scalability. That was the biggest challenge because we weren't from the industry. So we had to build redundant supply chains, we had to build multiple suppliers, and we had to be confident that none of those suppliers would hold us hostage in our moment of greatest need, where suddenly the price changes and they take all of your residual gross profit. So those were some of the considerations, but within the first 12 months of actually operating, and so from the day that our catalog actually launched and we did our first trade show and we started pounding the phones with a team of people, within the first 12 months we were profitable. So we were fortunate to expand, but obviously we gave it 3 years as sort of the runway. So it took about a year to set up. Hopefully that made sense.
Did you know that you wanted to implement the charity part from the beginning? Was there ever a question of, well, how are we ever going to give away money if we don't even know if we can, keep the business running?
Make money. We looked at it. We did some studying ahead of time, and it's a viable business. We knew the metrics behind the business. We knew research on reasonable gross margins and what we needed to stay afloat as a business. The charity component, is something in our corporate DNA. That came from the very, very beginning. We were designed not just to grow a business, but to do it in partnership with a charity, where the more we benefited as a business, the more they would benefit as a charity as well. So that's part of our value proposition. A lot of our clients like that component about us, and that's what allowed us to take a commodity product, effectively a t-shirt, a hoodie, something like that. It allowed us to take the commodity and differentiate it that was hard to replicate by others, and that allows you to win business. So that component was there from the beginning. And then did we actually
Oh, now I've lost you.
part of your question was,
Oliver, you're breaking
for
up.
a second, Shannon, whether the charity.
Okay, Faizun.
I think he's gone.
Yeah.
We were. Oh, am I here?
We lost you. We lost you for about 15 seconds. So I'm gonna move things over to Faizun for right now, and just have Faizun. I'd love to hear about the challenges that you were dealing with when you were starting your business? It could be financially or just supply chain setup, whatever it may be.
So, I guess I'll answer it maybe a little bit differently. One, I knew this is something that I wanted to do for quite a few years. I was chicken for about 5 to 7 years, a total chicken. I wouldn't do it. I thought of all the reasons why, it didn't make sense, the money, the responsibilities, the obligations, name it, right? But all the while, I was working on the business model. So that's sort of the contradictory piece, if you will, right? So on the one hand, I'm saying to myself, no, I can't do it, but on the other, I'm trying to move it forward. One of the biggest challenges that I will say to you that we had was, and Oliver might, and you actually might have experienced the same thing, is essentially getting skilled labor, right? Mm-hmm. So all of our products, essentially, these are different products. They're handmade products. They're not mass-produced. They're not made on a machine. We actually need people who have the skills in design and embroidery and hand weaving to be able to produce these fabrics. While we have thousands of artisans
sorry, everyone. There is major technical difficulties.
Shannon,
Yeah.
Did you lose me?
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry.
Okay, so you can continue with your thought.
Sorry. So I was saying finding skilled labor, I think, is because they really set the standard for what you're able to produce. And given that fabrics are sort of the raw materials from which everything else is made, it was important for us to be able to get skilled workers. That, I wouldn't say that took a while because it's still an issue. We continue to try to scale and grow and increase our labor force and going every year to Bangladesh multiple times to be able to pick out the best of the best that you have. I think it's a constant thing that you have to do. So I would say that would be one.
Oliver, did you find you had an issue with finding skilled workers, or maybe also like sourcing the types of fabrics that you were using? Is Oliver gone as well? Do I have anyone on this call with me?
No, I'm actually here. I was waiting for Faith. Absolutely. Did we have any challenges in terms of the fabrics that we're sourcing?
Skilled. Well, Faizun was talking about the challenge with skilled labor. So I was asking if you found that was an issue for you, or your other challenges that may have come up.
For us, that wasn't as much of a challenge, and I think it depends on which country you're operating in and so on. But we started working with existing factories that already manufacture. So, I mean, really, they're the ones who are looking for the skilled labor, so that would be one of their challenges. Our challenge was finding factories we could rely on, and where deadlines meant deadlines, because we work with a lot of corporate university, or let's just call business clients. Deadlines were extremely important. If you have a large event and you need 500 pieces for the event and we're a day late, the order has no value. So finding the right supply chain was a challenge for us, and breaking it down into lots of different pieces, because everybody wants to supply the whole package to you, and everybody tells you absolutely they can. But the reality is you need a redundant supply chain, and you need to break it up so that no one supplier can hold you hostage to your needs. And sadly, that's one thing you have to consider when going into this business.
And so how did you navigate that? Both of you, I guess, let's shift gears a little bit to solutions. How did you sort of navigate those challenges?
Do you want me to? I don't know about the... Sure. Okay, so I'll take that. So we did something called... there's a famous investor from the 50s called Philip Fisher, and he wrote this book, and he referred, when researching a company, something called scuttlebutt. Where you talk to the suppliers and customers of a company to learn more. So we took that concept and we applied it to the clothing business itself. And so at every step, the fabric producers will not tell you what the tricks of their trade are. But to curry favor, they're happy to teach you about the cut and sew people. And the screeners will not tell you their stuff, but they'll teach you about the fabric people. So as you interview each step of the chain, the others, they teach you nothing about their own, because they prefer that you stay blind on that. So each one would teach you, and then once in a while you find someone who really takes you under their wing and starts explaining to you that no, you're using 50% more fabric than you should be. And so as you start to get those senses and those bits of information, it becomes a lot more viable to produce. And for us, that was especially important because we produce what's effectively a commodity. We had to be, and we produce it domestically in North America, we had to be super competitive.
Faizun, what about you?
So we launched the company in 2011, and about 5-6 years prior to that, I did sort of the back end work, and the biggest piece of that work was essentially going around various artisan communities in the country to be able to say, okay, here are the 10 best that do embroidery. Here are the 10 best that do beading, right? So to kind of create buckets of skill sets, if you will. So that's been tremendously helpful for us. That's one. The second thing I would say is we have a very unique partnership. So it kind of in the way that Oliver has a charity partner, I would say we have they're our most important supply chain partner. They're one of the most established, oldest garments manufacturer in Bangladesh. So they produce about, they can do, in terms of capacity, woven pieces, they can do about 2 million knit pieces every day, right? So this is, I'm talking about the kind of the scale of production that they have. We have a partnership with them where they have allocated a certain number of workers to us. These are folks who are skilled in sort of producing export quality garments, right? So they've been exporting garments to the United States and to Europe for the last 35-40 years. And the partnership has been really invaluable because on the one hand, once we had the artisans who produced the raw fabrics, the raw materials, we then needed another set of people who would make the finished goods. And in order for me to be able to sell these goods in a country like the United States, where consumer tastes and preferences are so exacting and they're so high, you have to be able to produce end goods that you basically can't touch it on poor quality. You can't say no, this good cannot be sold in the US. So I'd say for us that has been a huge advantage. That's a partnership that took about 1.5 years for us to actually, put together, as you might imagine, and everything sort of in the developing world takes 5 times as longer as you would expect it to. That's sort of the norm. If things go right, that's actually, you celebrate it because most often than not, you expect things to go wrong and things to take forever. So that's been a really fantastic partnership that we've had, and frankly, in many ways, it's one of our saving graces.
And there's one question that's a good one to bring up, which is how do you find these partners? How did you go about finding the partners? I'd like to hear from both of you, but Faizun, if you want to start with that.
Sure. I would say, Shannon, in many ways, again,
Okay. We lost you. Hold that thought.
Uh-oh. Damn it.
Oh, she's back.
Oh, you're back.
Okay, did you guys just hear me swear?
It's okay, candid, casual. Keep going.
Don't worry, it's only on the internet forever.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, thank you, Oliver. No, I was going to say, for me, it really has not been formulaic at all. It's been very organic. The partnership that I just described that we have with the garment manufacturer, they're actually a family friend. We've known them for as long as he's had this company in existence. So it's a bit of a different relationship, and even having that personal relationship, it still took us close to 2 years to put the partnership together. I don't think there's any one way to do it. I think you kind of go with what feels, for me at least, a lot of what I do is very intuitive. If it feels right in the gut for me, if I think it's a partnership that'll work, if I trust and
And you're gone. Oliver, what about you? Because I know that a lot of, at least in my experience, it wasn't like I had a family friend that I could just, oh, you have a factory, do you have a sew shop? Great. Like, what about you? How did you set up your supply chain?
So I think it was at the beginning, especially, there was a lot of interviewing, it was cold calling. Like you pick up the yellow pages or go on Google and you say, look for factory. The challenge in our industry was it's not a technologically advanced industry. So sometimes finding those people, we had to find 1 or 2 referrals. You go talk to them, then you ask, whom else you can talk to. And again, the fabric supplier will refer you to 4 cut and sew people. Cut and sew companies won't refer you to their competitors. So you have to go to each stage, talk to them, get to know them, understand it. And the biggest challenge, other than initially learning what we needed to do, the biggest challenge for us was figuring out when to actually pull the trigger. At what point do you know enough to get going? And if you wait to know everything, you may miss your opportunity, or you may take too long. But if you start too soon, you also may end up not doing it correctly. And that's certainly happened. We had an order that required union-made sweatpants, and it was for a university, and we did, I don't know, 400 or 500 pairs of these sweatpants. And we were told, don't worry, we do have it under control, we do this all the time. Excellent. I was thrilled, I was very excited. You know, first decent size order that we have. And I got a call from the embroiderer saying, you better get over here. They all look like they're the same size, even though they're labeled extra small to double XL. And I said, well, what do you mean? So I drove in about an hour and a half from where I am to see these pants, and that's when I discovered the next thing. I had to ship them. I had nothing else, and it was one of the steep learning curves. But I did offer a full money-back guarantee for everyone who received it who didn't want it, and we would pay for shipping. And what's funny is only about 40% of people returned it. So that's when you see on TV full money-back guarantee, you realize they do it for a reason. But we really did want to take them all back. We just couldn't afford not to ship something. So there were a lot of trials and tribulations in that first year, especially.
Yeah, quality control is a whole other beast too. And for those of you who are maybe looking into starting something on your own, who are watching, I think, for a lot of us, the issue of minimums come up. It's like, oh, well, I can only afford to do 200 units. Who's going to do that? And I will say that the sew shops, in the States at least, are out there. They're there, but like Oliver said, it just takes cold calling, Googling, just knocking down doors, and really it's the relationship building. It's getting people to want to invest in your project, invest their time in your project, and building those relationships so that they feel like it could be a lasting relationship with them as well. But yeah, I think, and then quality control. Faizun, actually, I'm really interested, were you just stayed on the ground there the whole time during production, or can you walk us through what that was like?
Sure. I'll give you an example. I think it's a little more exciting than sort of theoreticals.
Yeah.
We have this amazing partnership with it's an organization called Fashion for Development, and they are essentially the United Nations global advocacy platform that looks at using fashion for social change in the developing world. They have their signature event, which is called the First Ladies Luncheon, and it coincides with the United Nations General Assembly that happens in September in New York every year. And essentially, they invite the first ladies of different countries, so political first ladies, as well as first ladies of fashion and film, right? So that's sort of the audience you're working with. And so the woman who runs the organization, she came to me and she said, look, we're having this event, and I have this really great idea, and I need you to basically give me 550 handmade purses, clutches, that'll be presented as a gift to each person that comes. So we were excited, we were thrilled. We had just started. This would be a huge opportunity for us. Get the word out there, create the buzz. Well, I was in the United States at the time, and by the way, I was also pregnant. I was not going to be getting on a plane. I felt like crap all the time, and I had about 23, 24 days, right, between when I started and when I needed to deliver the order. It would be an understatement to say it was a freaking nightmare. I didn't sleep that entire time that we did that. I was on Skype calls. Did you lose me? Am I here?
You're here.
Okay. I had Skype calls with my team morning and night. Basically it's a handmade silk clutch that we made from this really lovely silk material. First of all, we couldn't get the exact shade of gray that Fashion for Development was asking for us, right? So we gave all kinds of swatches, we did all kinds of crazy things on Skype. I mailed it over. This is the exact shade of gray I need. They come back to me and it's not the same. essentially we played around until we found the exact dye, exact color that we were looking for. That was one. The second thing, we finally got the exact amount of fabric we needed. We actually produced more. Once we did that, it needed to be the Fashion for Development logo.
Uh-oh.
Leaving us on a cliffhanger. Okay, well, let's move gears again, and I want to start taking some questions from the people who have written in, and the most popular one right now is, how do we get past a throwaway mindset in our consumer culture, where now fashion and clothes are seen as commodities? Some say clothes are our second skin. How can we inspire people to look at clothes their way? So thank you, Maura, for asking that question. Oliver, do you want to take that one?
Sure. I mean, fast fashion is something that's, that's exciting for a lot of people. They get to change. They get to get something new all the time. I think the only way that maybe we can compete with that or to shift the mindset is education. And I think the internet has been an incredible tool for consumer education. The amount people know about the production processes, about where things come from, how they're made, and so on, far exceeds anything that we saw 10 years ago or 20 years ago. So we have this incredible tool to distribute information as we continue to engage in the conversation, talk about the impact that and the environmental impact and the social impact that you can have through fashion. Consumers themselves will begin to demand new things, and with that, companies will respond. And I think that's always the way it's been. Consumers become better educated, they want something different, and then companies follow the demand.
I totally agree with that. I think it definitely comes from the place of the consumer and placing that demand. And from the side of the branding and how you market, sort of, it has to come from a place of empowerment, I think, more than shaming. And it's so much easier to engage a consumer when you make them feel like their dollars are really going somewhere that they can feel good about.
Yeah.
Well, we're just in the process in all of our goods of creating a code where every time you buy an item, you can enter that code into the internet and track your impact. So you'll actually be able to see some of the direct impact you're having on the clean water programs, alternative income programs, the education, the school building, all of that, and you're really going to see what your dollars are actually doing.
Yeah.
Indirectly, of course, but nonetheless.
Yeah,
Shannon.
transparency. Yeah, go ahead.
Shannon, the only other thing I would add, I would agree to everything that Oliver said. I think the biggest thing is advocacy and education. The only other thing I would add is, there's still this prevailing sort of mindset that if you're a social enterprise or you're an ethical, sustainable fashion company, your product doesn't really measure up. It's very craftsy, it's very sort of, fairgroundish, it's very kitschy, it's kind of, crunchy granola, Birkenstock kind of thing. It's that mindset still. I think whatever products we make, they have to be able to stand on their own. The story that Oliver talks about, the story that I talk about, the different women who are making it and the ways we are enhancing their lives, that's lovely, that's wonderful. But we cannot use that to sell the product. The product must absolutely stand on its own. It must be, the customer must want to buy the product, first of all. Once they've bought the product and then they hear what the story is, I think that's what enhances it, right? That's what the value add is. So that would be the only thing I'd add.
I would completely agree with that. I'm really glad you brought that up. That's one of the main things I say, in my program is your product has to sell itself first. Sustainability, ethics, all of that stuff, I find charity, all of that is always going to come maybe a close second, but it's always going to come second.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And value. The product, you can't charge drastically more. You have to be competitive at the price point.
Yeah.
Because consumers aren't willing to pay a tremendous premium for all of those secondary, tertiary nice things. And for example, when we started, we still don't use hemp. We have people ask us, why don't you use hemp as a fabric? And the reason is, it's the fear of a misperception of who we are. So we supply things to, as I said, companies, schools, universities. As soon as we introduce hemp, some people will understand what a great fabric it can be. Others will see it as, tantamount to us, having some sort of granola declaration, which is great and will appeal to a particular segment of consumers, but it will also serve to alienate others. So what we wanted to be was as mass market appeal as possible, and that's why we didn't source and haven't yet gone down that road.
For sure. Mariana also asks a question: how do you measure or validate whether a factory or workshop is truly ethical? So how do you define ethical? Which I think is a good thing to bring up, because there is no real auditing system. So who wants to start with that? I guess, Faizun, you want to start?
Sure. I think that's really one of the key, sort of the crux of everything we do, right? If we say we sell ourselves as ethical businesses, how really do you measure how ethical you're being? I think first and foremost, it goes back to one of the key things for which I started the company, which was anybody who works deserves to have a dignified job, a job with dignity, and they deserve to have a job that actually enhances and changes their livelihoods, right? It shouldn't be some minimum, wage at a pittance that doesn't move the needle in any kind of way for you or your family. So, in a country where minimum wage is, literally it's like, less than $1 a day sometimes, on average, we pay our workers between 2 to 4 times that, and it varies obviously with the size of the order and the amount of hours that they're putting in. Have I cracked the code of how to make this really exact? I would say I'm far from it. It's something, again, like with every other aspect of the business, it's sort of tweaking, it's making changes as you go along. But I think at the end of the day, this might sound sort of very Pollyanna-ish, but I think if your intent is good and you know why you're doing it, of course we need to make money. Keep saying, before anything else, you're a business. You need to be able to money in order to actually be able to do the social kinds of things that you're talking about. And so in order for us to be able to do that, again, think about it, the reason we have the goods we have is because of the labor that we have. And if we don't pay them fairly, we don't pay them in a way where they want to come to work for us, it goes against the grain of who it is we say we are. So I'd say for us, that's sort of one of the key things, to be able to make sure that our workers are being paid a fair wage that is not your minimum living wage. It goes beyond that, in addition to some of the other stuff we do. So for example, who we finally hire. Did you lose me?
You're back.
I'm back. Sorry. So I was just going to say, one of the things we do is we open savings accounts for every woman who walks in. In a poor country like Bangladesh, most women do not have a bank account. Their wages, once they earn it, it goes to their husbands. They don't really own the purse strings. So though, again, you kind of get into more deep-seated social, economic, gender issues, but those are some of the ways in which we try to say, these are the reasons for which we say our company is ethical, because this is what we're focusing on.
Mm-hmm. And for someone who isn't able to get in, like you're really, in it, you're right there in sort of your supply chain. For someone who is looking and sort of navigating their way through this, like Oliver, can you walk us through, like, what were the key things that you guys looked for in your partners?
Sure. When we started, and to this day, I'd say it's probably true. I think the more we learn, the more we're aware of how much we don't know. Mm-hmm. And I think first acknowledging that we don't know is one of the components. And then you hear stories. You go visit a factory and some factories are very good at having one part of the factory that looks perfect, the other that doesn't. We realize very quickly that there's a very sophisticated movement out there to put people like us at ease that, oh, this is a great place. So we turn to third parties. And the third parties that we turn to are various groups. So if we were working abroad, Social Accountability 8000, there were many other groups like that. There's the Fair Labor Association in the US and Canada. So that's, for example, some of the people that we that we've used, and we continue to disclose all of our suppliers to the various agencies that we use to monitor, because we know that they are much better at understanding, they're experts in understanding how that process works. And it's not a guarantee, but it means that they're most likely to ensure that everything is being ethically made. That, and we of course do random drop-ins, and we of course do unannounced visits, and all of those things, but none of those on their own are really always sufficient, in our opinion. So we try to constantly layer other redundancies on there to ensure that it's the highest probability of being ethically made, and we're confident in that approach.
Vanita asks, who are the current major players in this space? And I'm not sure if she means on the retail side or the supplier side, but does anything come to mind for you guys, the major players?
Sorry, can you say that one more time? That broke up for me. Can you just repeat the question?
Who are the current major players in this space? So let's...
Go
ahead.
Go ahead. Oh, I'd say the major players in terms of third-party monitoring?
I don't think so. I think this was an older question, but I think maybe she's asking about the current major players in the space of like ethical fashion.
I see. Faizun?
Yeah. I'm trying to think of course I can't remember the name. It's one of the largest in the UK. People Tree, something Tree, People Life.
People Tree.
People Tree. I immediately thought of them. In terms of sort of, I don't know. I mean, I don't think there's one sort of large ethical fashion player. What I see more and more happening now is you have sort of major department store retailers, ethical component where they will have these one-off partnerships. You have other retailers, mid-market retailers like, you know, a Kate Spade. They will have their own ethical line, sub-line. I see a lot more of that happening. I think it's an evolution in the ethical fashion industry. Quite frankly, I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing, but I see a lot of that happening. So I don't know whether I answered the question, but I don't know of one or two that I would say would be the major players.
I guess the first that comes to mind for me would be Patagonia and just their whole like messaging and what they're and then Eileen Fisher from the female fashion side. They're doing amazing things.
Although what's interesting is they never actually really discuss sustainability that much. They're extraordinarily sustainable, but they talk very little about it, and it's really one of the most amazing things about their brand.
It is, and it just goes to prove the product has to sell itself first, design comes first, all of those things we sort of talked about.
Absolutely.
So from Indrani, there often is a perception that products made in developing countries are synonymous with cheap. What steps can sustainable fashion take to shift this perception to help consumers understand developing countries actually means unique, skilled, talented workers? So Faizun, I'll obviously give that one to you.
A little bit earlier when I...
Uh-oh.
No. I don't think we're the ones to talk about this. Faizun, come back.
Although we manufacture domestically, and I'll just while we're waiting for Faizun to come back, I'll share one of the things I always find amusing about the whole thing is if you were to go to the factories in the U.S. and Canada, the cut and sew factories, the domestic high quality production, often the only people with needle skills who are able to work in those factories are people who used to work in factories overseas.
That's very true.
And so if you could actually show people that that the workers are one and the same, that might perhaps, I don't know how you do that in a great mass market way, but that might actually go a long way to making people understand that it's not actually a drastically different quality when it's the same worker who made it 3 years ago versus this year.
And I think that fast fashion has very negatively affected this sort of perception as well, because you think like overseas outsourcing, it's cheap because it's cheap fast fashion, whereas most people don't think, well, overseas the beadwork by some of the people in certain African countries, or the women, the artisans that you're working with, Faizun, or the artisans in Central America, that is like, I mean, it's a native indigenous talent that is just nothing we can sort of even compare in terms of hand sewing with a sewing machine. But Faizun, you're back, so I'll let you. No, sorry.
Sorry, go ahead, Oliver.
Or no. It's I was helping kill time until you were back.
No, I think again I'll say, Shannon, really at the end of the day, those companies like mine that source essentially from the developing world, it's really on us to make sure that the product competes with all of the other products that are being sold in Western markets, and we shouldn't rely on the crutch of, oh, we have a social mission, hence you should buy from us. We're helping poor people in need. Hence, you should buy from us. It should be, our products are fantastic, they look beautiful, and you want it, so buy from us. And no, by the way, we...
Nope, that's not good. So what I could add in there is we talk about quality of fashion or quality of product, but I think over time the middle class has been growing in a lot of developing countries, and their domestic markets have been demanding higher and higher quality as people attain a higher and higher level and lifestyle. So you're starting to see domestic demand and foreign demand drive quality up across the board. Can you hear me, Shannon? Okay.
Yeah, I just hear the.
Yeah, I hear the nice background noise as well.
So we're getting ready to wrap up, and that may happen sooner or later if everyone hasn't left us. But let's talk a little bit about, I'll take this last question from Margia. Any advice for public health conscious aspiring designers and entrepreneurs interested in slow fashion startups?
Interested in slow fashion startups? That's a very complex question.
So,
so I think. Oh, someone
go
back.
ahead.
So can you repeat it one more time? Advice for entrepreneurs interested in public health.
Public health conscious aspiring designers and entrepreneurs interested in slow fashion startups.
Okay, look, I think anyone who's interested, I mean, the best thing you can do is jump in 2 feet first. Because when people do things on the side, it never quite works out the same way. When everything is riding on something, it's incredible how much your creativity and how much your desire to solve a problem drives you first. As for slow fashion versus fast fashion, I think you need extraordinary scale to truly compete in fast fashion. So it's more larger brands that have been able to generate the infrastructure required for that. Most startups are essentially slow fashion or medium fast fashion or something, but not true, H&M fast fashion where 30 days require, there's new products being shipped out every 30 days. And as for the public health component in that, I think it's worth learning about some of the different fabrics and options out there that have a positive environmental impact. When you realize that 10% of the world's global pesticide use is used for cotton production, you realize the impact you can have on the lives of individual farmers and affect public health that way by simply choosing to purchase organic cotton. Now, is there enough for everyone to use it and for Walmart to be able to put every t-shirt sold in Walmart out of organic cotton? No, but that's why there's a lot of companies out there who are now guaranteeing organic farmers minimum purchases per year so that they can allow their fields to lie fallow long enough to convert to organic cotton production. So there's bits and pieces like that. Hopefully that answers the question a bit.
Yeah, I think that was a good answer. Entrepreneurs are considered to be social entrepreneurs within an already established company. What kind of advice would you give them to change the current mindset of these fashion brands? And that's from Fernando. And that's a good question.
That's a good question. Faizun, do you want to take that, or do you want me to take a stab at it?
Yeah, Oliver, why don't you? Because I'm still trying to kind of figure out the question in my head.
Okay, so if you're an entrepreneur, I mean, I think you're dealing with a different political animal. You're dealing with a larger company, and with that comes established practices, established ways of doing things, and so on. So one of the things you have to do is build a very, very strong business around it, and not be afraid of the risk you take. One of the observations that I can't help but notice over the years has been that people who do well in large organizations do well not by just towing the party line. That's the survivor category, but by introducing new ideas and by being willing to take risks. So if you put a good business case together, if you take it to them and you show that there's demand for it. I mean, there's a lot of people come up with ideas and say, I think this will sell, and let's make it and let's spend millions of dollars, and then hopefully we'll convince people to buy it. I would flip that around and go from the other side and go locate the demand for it, prove there's demand, show the cost structure around it, and then be willing to also put your money where your mouth is, and or in a large organization, it really means risk your career, and you know, without that risk, there's really no, the rewards are not quite as exciting.
Yeah, I would agree.
And entrepreneurs do that all the time. We risk bankruptcy every time we start something. So
I think, you know, there's such, you know, a growing need for innovation. Like the rate of innovation within brands is so much faster these days because everyone's just trying to compete at such a higher level with social media and the new ways of marketing. So yeah, I think that's a really good point. Faizun, what do you have to add?
Actually, I don't have very much to add. I think what Oliver said was spot on. The only other thing I would add is that I think it's a great sort of laboratory before you decide to kind of jump into it on your own. Use the larger organization as kind of your test bed, right? Yes, you are taking risk. Exactly, right? Use somebody else's money, use somebody else's resources.
Oh no, we lost.
Okay, so I disagree with that completely. You should treat other people's money even more carefully than you treat your own. So I know you guys might say that. I sit here and say, no, if we have people who come into the company and they want to do something, they need to prove the case.
For sure.
If we do something, the same thing, because there's risk. So I will gladly take the other side on that one, make this more exciting.
I know our fight and our prep call was way more entertaining. We should just.
That's right. Too bad we can't televise that one.
What fight? What are you guys talking about?
Okay, so we are almost done. We have about 8 minutes left, and we have a couple. Okay, so Heather asks, are there specific depressed areas in the U.S. that can benefit in the way that developing country workforces can? Where can the most impact be made by reviving economies in the U.S.? I could take this one just in terms of, you look at the textile belts of America, that's like in the Carolinas, and all of that outsourcing, offshoring that happened in the 90s when all the labor moved overseas. And now that's coming back, and that area is being revived. They're complete, I've toured through them, complete vacant warehouses where factories used to be thriving, and they would be passed down from family to family. So I would say the infrastructure is there completely in the Carolinas, and they're just it's building up slowly but surely. But I would say that's one place to look, and they're looking for the work.
Well, and I'd love to add to that, and I think we often say there's the whole saying about history doesn't repeat itself, but it does rhyme. So you do see that that some of the stuff that was outsourced coming back, but a lot of it's coming back in a slightly different form. I mean, we are an expensive society. At the end of the day, especially clothing, it's a very manual job. And so likely over time, clothing, especially for simple goods that aren't as artisan driven, will seek out the lowest labor cost out there, you know, on average. I'm not saying every brand or every idea, but on average. But the manufacturing jobs that are coming back stateside, we're seeing higher and higher tech manufacturing jobs. So for example, Tesla's new battery factory, and when they were looking at, I think it's 5 million square feet of factory space, those are manufacturing jobs, but they're higher, and we're starting to see more and more of that. So I think for the components of the clothing industry that are more capital intensive, labor makes up a lower component of that cost structure, and so you can fundamentally compete when you have productive workers in a higher labor cost environment like the United States. So those components will come back. Will cut and sew truly ever come back in the way it was? I would venture to say there will be pockets of it which serve specific needs, but it will remain a niche industry as opposed to be a mass market industry the way it was 50 years ago.
Well, we just don't have the skilled labor like we used to either. The art of sewing is just
lost,
dying off. Yeah.
It's the art of tweeting now.
Yeah, the art of tweeting. Oh gosh, where is our world going? Okay, so last question. I want to leave this on a high note. as consumers, what can we do? Where can we put our purchasing power? Where can we feel like we're making a difference with our dollars when we look at ethical fashion or just fashion? Faizun, I'll give that to you.
Sure. I think it's important for consumers to realize that even as an individual, you have tremendous power because you're voting with your pocketbook, essentially. It takes a little bit of time. Sure, it might take a little bit of research, but look for the companies out there like Oliver's, like yours, like mine, right? Look for companies that are trying to do the right thing and buy products from those. If you're going to, the holiday season is coming up and you're going to get gifts for your family, look at companies like that instead of going to a Target or a Walmart. Sure, some of the things might be a little cheaper, but I think, again, it goes back to the education and advocacy that Oliver was talking about. If it's important enough for you, if you want to be able to, in some small way, with your purchasing power, make a contribution to society at large, look out for companies like ours. I think that would be sort of my suggestion.
Oliver?
And I would just, I agree with everything Faizun said there. But the one thing I would also add is challenge us. And by us, I don't just mean ethical fashion companies, but all companies. If you do go to Walmart, challenge them, ask them, be curious. One person will make a difference, but what you don't realize is that every time a company hears from one person, that represents a certain group or volume of people. So you may think I'm just one person, but no, to a company, you may represent 5 or 10,000 people. So when they hear from 20, 30, 50, 100 people, it becomes an issue. A lot of companies keep track of suggestions to see which ones are sufficiently important and prioritize them according to how many suggestions they've had. So that is common, and continue to challenge us in the eco-fashion sphere, because are we doing everything perfectly? Far from it. It's always a journey towards a goal, as opposed to something that we've arrived at. And all of us produce different things. We operate in different segments of the market, and so we encounter very different challenges. And I mean, at the end of the day, truly, compromises are made. I mean, there are compromises being made every day, and all we're trying to do is say, how do we push it forward a little bit further every day? And it's our hope that we're doing that, but ultimately we're accountable to you, our customers. So we hope that you guys also, keep us accountable and keep asking the tough questions, and it makes it exciting for us too, because it allows us to progress faster than we might otherwise.
That's a great note to end on. Thank you, Oliver. I'm going to bring Meredith back in so she can wrap everything up. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Well, thank you so much to Faizun, Oliver, Shannon, for such a fruitful and really energetic discussion. I also wanted to thank everyone in the audience for joining us today, and also for submitting your questions throughout. And apologize to everyone for the technical issues. Thanks for bearing with us throughout that. A few quick closing announcements. The 2014 Net Impact Conference is coming up next month in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Don't forget to register at netimpact.org/conference if you'd like to join us. We'll also be hosting a webinar on how to make the most of your conference experience in just a few weeks, and you can sign up for that at netimpact.org/webinars. Last but not least, you'll all be receiving a link to a survey about today's Hangout in your email in just a few minutes. Please take a moment to fill that out. We really, really appreciate your feedback. Thanks again, all of our speakers and everyone in the audience. This has been a Net Impact Issues in Depth call.